Hi guys, this is Andrew with Headphones.com. Welcome to the Headphone Show, and today we're going to talk about the iFi Drop Zen DAC Zen CAN Signature stack. And in particular, we're going to compare this with the regular non-drop, non-signature Zen stack and see which one is better for the Sennheiser HD6XX, which is also from Drop. So let's take a look. Now this is mainly going to be a review of this Zen Signature stack here from Drop. I'm going to explain what these are, but I have also published a full article on this already, and it's up on headphones.com. I'll leave a link in the description if you guys want to check that out. But let me just go over quickly what this actually is. One of these units, the bottom one in particular, is a DAC. And the top one here, is the Zen CAN, is the amplifier. And then the same thing with these ones here. The main difference here is that the Zen DAC is not just a DAC with a non-signature version, it's also a DAC amp combo, so it has a headphone amplifier output. Now there's interesting things going on with both of these as far as what's going on inside. These have many of the same features, including a balanced output option actually on the back here, using I believe a Pentacon connector there. But the main additional difference, apart from the fact that the non-signature DAC has a headphone output as well, is that the Drop Signature DAC here is supposed to be designed with some of the more premium components that are found in iFi's Pro line. So the idea is that rather than trying to do everything like they've done with the original Zen DAC, with the Drop Signature Zen DAC, they've just tried to make it a DAC, focus just on the DAC component, and they've added components from their Pro line here. Now with the Drop DAC, I do think this is a better DAC than what you would find in the non-signature version here. And I do like that they're, not trying to do everything and cram everything into, the one box. But admittedly, this looks a little bit strange given the fact that you have essentially the same housing here, the same looking box, just a slightly different color scheme on the signature version here to match with all the rest of the Drop stuff. With the signature version, you essentially have what looks like fewer features at a more expensive price. And that is a bit weird, but at the same time, this is meant to have, again, better components. Take that for what you will. And then this is supposed to just be the DAC, meaning that this is supposed to be a better DAC than what's going on in here. Now, speaking of which, the DAC chips they're using in these, in both of them, it is the Burr Brown family of DACs, and that means that it's a little bit more on the laid back side of things, at least traditionally. And that's a little bit odd, in my opinion, given that with the HD6XX here, which is what this is meant for, it's already a fairly laid back and smooth sounding headphone. So it's interesting that they're using this same Burr Brown chip in here, and it might just be because that's just what they're set up to do for all of their DACs. But in a way, it's kind of like doubling down on that sort of smooth quality there. That may be a good thing. I'll leave that up to you. Now, the question is, how does this sound? Well, they both sound fine, in my opinion. And I do think that I hear a little bit more of a clear and analytic sound from the signature DAC here, but I don't think it's significant enough where I'd be able to identify this in a blind test. I think this is also within the realm of placebo and, sided biases and things like that. So I don't think I can be confident that I, would be able to say, okay, this one is clearly better. It's just that there might be a very slight benefit to this DAC here. And I think at this price level, most of the DACs that are out there, unless they're, different families of DACs like ESS versus AKM versus Burr Brown, or you go to like an R2R setup or a custom DAC, for the most part, they're generally going to sound fairly similar within the same family. And I think that's kind of what's going on here. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing. They both sound fine to me. And I do think that the signature Zen DAC is one of the better implementations of the Burr Brown DAC. And I like, again, that it's just focused on the DAC and not trying to do everything as well. Because remember that, there was some controversy about the original Zen DAC where it didn't measure all that well, and, you didn't get all the cables for it and whatnot. And so, with this, this is more of a mature product, in my opinion. However, my biggest issue with the signature Zen DAC is that it comes in at around $250. That's literally twice the price of the non-drop version here, and I don't think it's twice the performance, plus you have fewer features here. So the cognitive dissonance that occurs when you're trying to compare the more expensive and less feature-rich DAC that's using the same box here, I think is warranted. Now, what's way more interesting than the DACs, in my opinion, is what's going on with the amplifiers. Normally, with iFi's amplifiers, you have two functions. One is a bass boost, and one is a 3D effect of some kind, or a widener of some kind. And with both of these, you do have the same functions, but they do also behave a little bit differently. I should note that the bass boost and 3D functions here are done in the analog domain here. This is not digital or using any sort of digital signal processing whatsoever. It's all analog, for people who care about that. But you do get a bass boost function, and then in the drop version here, that's actually titled the HD6XX button, because again, this is meant to pair specifically with the Sennheiser HD6XX, which is of course the legendary headphone that everybody has and everybody loves. Now let's talk about what the HD6XX button actually does. So it boosts the bass on the HD6XX to match or be slightly more elevated than the 2013 Harman Target. This headphone has an amazing frequency response on its own there for the upper mids and treble. The only real nitpick that I'd have about its frequency response is, that the bass rolls off, of course. And this is great because for some of iFi's other bass boost functions, like the one that's on the non-drop, non-signature Zen DAC, they call this true bass, it elevates it quite a bit more. And when you use the bass boost function, the true bass on the non-signature Zen DAC with the HD6XX, it boosts it so much that this is going to introduce a little bit of distortion for this headphone. Whereas when you use the HD6XX button on the signature Zen CAN, it only boosts the bass to around the level of the 2013 Harman Target, which means that you don't get any audible distortion in the bass for the HD6XX. Now, in my opinion, this is all achievable through EQ. You can do this with software on your own, and you don't need to pay the extra money for this because, again, this also comes in at around $250. You could buy a much less expensive amplifier like a Shit Audio Magni Heresy or Topping L30 or something like that, and then just do the EQ yourself, and then you'd be fine. But what this does, in my opinion, for those of you who aren't comfortable doing EQ or you don't want to bother learning how to do it, is it adds the convenience factor of just being able to push a button and have it do it for you. So you're relying on their expertise to get the tuning right, to optimize the frequency response in the bass for the HD6XX. And I think in the bass they did get it right here. I think the HD6XX button is ideal for the bass shelf. Where things get weird is in the lower treble there, right at around 5 to 6 kHz. The HD6XX button also adds quite a bit of treble energy there. It adds a peak at around 5 to 6 kHz. And it's not quite on the level of causing like percussion compression issues, but it definitely makes it a little bit too aggressive in that area, bordering on, the sibilant range there, the consonant range there. And it does make this headphone a little bit more lively, yes, but it also makes it a little bit more aggressive. And I'm led to believe actually that iFi have done quite a bit of research on this to identify what the optimal tuning change would be for the treble of the HD6XX. But in my opinion, there are two potential ways of looking at this. The first is that when you use the HD6XX button that boosts the bass and boosts the lower treble, that might be more immediately engaging with the HD6XX because it'll be more lively overall and maybe a little bit more fun right away. It'll grab your attention a little bit more significantly. But I think the other way of looking at this is to say that, well, one of the nice things about the HD6XX is that it is so smooth and you can just throw it on and get right into your music, and it's not fatiguing for long periods of time, while when you use the button with the HD6XX here on the drop signature Zen CAN, there is a risk that you are going to introduce some fatiguing qualities there around 5 to 6 kHz with that peak there. And I think I personally fall into that latter category where I want this headphone to be awesome for just getting into the music and listening for long periods of time and not having it be fatiguing or too sharp at certain areas in the treble. And so for me, I'm not really sure that 5 to 6 kHz boost that they gave it here with the HD6XX adjustment button is really a good idea. I mean, this is something that I would not want to EQ for this headphone. Now, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm unique in my taste for the HD6XX and what I like about it. Maybe there's other people out there who, when they listen to this, they go, I wish it had more 5 to 6 kHz energy. So I'll let you guys be the judge on that and whether or not this peak here that they've added is appropriate. But for my taste, I prefer it without that peak. Now, interestingly enough, I was actually able to measure the difference between the HD6XX button on the drop Zen CAN Signature and the non-signature edition here. I wanted to see if the bass boost function that you get on the non-signature edition is the same, and it is. And so for my preferences and the way that I like to hear the HD6XX, the non-signature edition amplifier, the Zen CAN, is actually the better choice because this doesn't have the 5 to 6 kHz peak. This doesn't have that emphasis there. So I was a little bit surprised by that, but I actually think this is kind of cool because now you can choose which one you want. If you prefer the HD6XX with that sort of smoother presentation in the lower treble there around 5 to 6 kHz, but you still want the bass boost, you go with the non-signature edition here, and it saves you a bunch of money because it's a lot cheaper. Or if you find yourself in the former category and you want a little bit more treble energy there, you go with the drop signature edition Zen CAN here that does give you a bit more energy there in the lower treble. Now, we also have to talk about the 3D function because the 3D function solves another one of the shortcomings of the HD6XX. For all the awesome frequency response that it has in the, mids and treble and whatnot, the HD6XX has a very tight and intimate soundstage. You generally have that 3 blob effect where you get left, right, and center, but you don't really get front, left, and front, right. And with the 3D function on both the drop signature version and the non-signature version, it fixes this issue. And also on both of them, it boosts the treble by the same amount. So when you do enable the 3D function without the bass boost whatsoever, you get a much brighter presentation overall. This is a much more counterclockwise tilted frequency response on the HD6XX, and I don't think it's particularly good. However, when you do use them in conjunction with one another, you get a much more balanced sound overall. It's still a little bit brighter relative to, the typical Harman target there in the mids and treble, but overall, it's a lot more balanced because you do still retain a lot of the bass extension from that 2013 Harman shelf from the bass boost. Now, it's not as high as it is when you're not using the 3D effect, but it's still there, which is really nice. So the 3D function, essentially what it does is it widens the stage a bit, gives you front, left, and front, right. It fixes the 3 blob issue with the Sennheiser HD6XX, but then it also brightens the frequency response by quite a bit. It makes things more counterclockwise tilted, and then, you do still get the bass roll off, so you got to use them together with the bass boost. Now, unfortunately, this is where I think the drop signature Zen CAN has the biggest issues, because when you enable both the HD6XX function and the 3D effect, it not only boosts the treble, but it makes that 5 to 6 kHz peak that you get from the HD6XX button that much more noticeable, because now that peak is way out of line with where the target is. For the rest of it, it's just a little bit north of the target, but when you enable both here, it's just a little bit too much. That balance gets thrown off a bit, and it ends up being, starts to be on the sharp and fatiguing side a little bit too strongly. Whereas, again, with the non-signature edition here, it retains a lot of that balance that it has in the treble. I mean, yes, maybe it is a little bit, again, brighter there, but it doesn't have that same peak that you get when you use the HD6XX button on the signature version. So, in conclusion, do I recommend the drop signature Zen stack? Is it the perfect amplifier DAC combo for the HD6XX? I do think they are both excellent units, but I think it's up to each of us to decide what kind of presentation we want for the HD6XX. Do you want something that's going to be a little bit brighter there at a 5 to 6 kHz range, or do you want it to retain its more relaxed and laid back tonal balance? In my opinion, with the regular Zen CAN here, you get basically all the features of the drop signature Zen CAN, and you get to retain the smooth quality of the HD6XX with the bass boost function, and you can use the 3D effect without it becoming too bright there at 5 to 6 kHz. So you get all of that at a significantly lower price point. So in my mind, it becomes difficult to recommend the drop Signature Zen CAN unless you specifically want that 5 to 6 kHz boost for the HD6XX. Because I think it's really cool that they're adding this analog function to, in theory, optimize the frequency response. It's just that, in my opinion, they've already done that with the non-signature version here. So really my biggest complaint with the drop signature Zen stack for the HD6XX is that it is straight up too expensive. If you think about what it would cost you to get all three of these, so including the headphones and then the stack, it would be around $700. And I know that this is largely for people who already own one of these, but if you think about what that overall price ends up being, $700 gets you an Ananda, $700 gets you a Focal Alex. You know, there's lots of other headphones that are around that price range that you could get into that are technically better performers than the HD6XX. And so in my opinion, while they are both good units and they are doing cool things with the frequency response and the HD6XX button here, I just think they're too expensive because iFi already has the non-signature versions that in some ways can potentially perform better for the HD6XX specifically. So really, I mean, if you're not planning on EQing anything and you want that convenience, I do recommend the Zen stack, but I do think that they've already produced the ideal one for the HD6XX in the non-signature version here, and it comes in at a lower price tag as well. Anyways, that does it for this video. Thanks for taking the time to watch it. If you like what I'm doing here, consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.